The playground buzzed with the sounds of children laughing, shouting, and chasing each other in the afternoon sun. Amid the chaos, young Daniel sat in his wheelchair near the edge of the field, watching quietly. At 10 years old, Daniel had already learned the hard way that not all kids were kind, especially to someone like him. Today was no different. A group of older boys approached, their voices carrying mockery and disdain. "Hey, slowpoke," one of them sneered, pointing at Daniel. "How's the view from down there?" Another boy leaned closer, smirking. "Maybe we should race." "Oh, wait, you'd lose before we even started." The group burst into laughter, their words sharp and cutting. Daniel clenched his fists on the armrests of his wheelchair, willing himself not to cry. He had heard it all before, but the cruelty still stung. What the bullies didn't realize was that Daniel's story was far from over. Their taunts would set off a chain of events that would challenge their prejudices and reveal a strength in Daniel that they never could have imagined. The bullies' laughter echoed through the playground as Daniel tried to focus on the pages of the book resting on his lap. But their taunts were impossible to ignore. "Bet you can't even play tag," one boy jeered, leaning against the handlebars of Daniel's wheelchair. "Tag? He can't even walk," another chimed in, sending the group into another round of cruel laughter. Daniel's heart pounded, but he refused to meet their eyes. He had faced this kind of treatment for as long as he could remember, not just because he was black, but because his disability made him an easy target. "You're wasting your time out here," one of them sneered, snatching the book from his lap. "Nobody cares about what you're reading." Daniel's hand shot out to grab it, but the boy tossed it to another, who threw it further down the field. The group scattered, laughing as they ran. Daniel wheeled himself toward the book, his hands trembling with anger and hurt. A small crowd of kids watched from a distance, but no one stepped in to help. For a moment, Daniel felt entirely alone. As Daniel reached for his book, his fingers trembling, a shadow fell across the pavement in front of him. "Need some help?" a voice asked, cutting through the haze of humiliation. He looked up to see Jasmine, a girl his age with long braids and an air of confidence. She wasn't part of the crowd of kids who usually teased him, but she wasn't exactly a close friend either. Daniel hesitated for a moment before nodding. Jasmine picked up his book, brushing off the dirt and placing it gently back in his lap. "Don't listen to those idiots," she said, her voice steady and sure. "They don't know anything about you." Daniel clutched the book tightly, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to kindness from anyone other than his parents, let alone someone his own age. "Thanks," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bench beside him, crossing her legs casually. She tilted her head, looking at him thoughtfully. "Why do you let them bother you?" she asked. Daniel blinked, taken aback by the question. "What do you mean?" "They're always in my face, calling me names, making fun of me." Jasmine shrugged. "Yeah, but they're just doing that to feel big. My dad says people like that are usually scared of something. Scared of being ignored, scared of not matching, scared of someone else being better than them." Daniel frowned, mulling over her words. "I don't know," he said finally. "It doesn't feel like they're scared. It feels like they just hate me." Jasmine leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "Maybe they do. But that's their problem, not yours. You don't have to carry their hate. Let them keep it, it's not yours to hold." Her words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He had spent so much time focusing on what the bullies said and did that he hadn't stopped to consider that their actions weren't a reflection of him, but of themselves. As the afternoon wore on, Jasmine stayed by Daniel's side. She asked about the book he was reading, and they started talking about their favorite stories and characters. For the first time in what felt like forever, Daniel felt like a regular kid, not a target or an outsider. Jasmine noticed the way Daniel's shoulders relaxed as they talked, the tension that had been there moments ago melting away. She smiled, happy to see him opening up, even just a little. "Do you want to hang out tomorrow?" she asked suddenly, catching Daniel off guard. "Really?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Yeah, really, Jasmine replied with a laugh. You're smart and cool, even if those jerks can't see it. Besides, I need someone to help me with math, and you seem like you'd be good at that. Daniel laughed for the first time in days, the sound surprising even himself. Okay, he said, a small smile creeping onto his face. The next day, Jasmine kept her promise. At lunch, she joined Daniel at his usual spot in the corner of the cafeteria, ignoring the curious stares from other students. She waved at a few kids who hesitated nearby, inviting them over. Slowly but surely, a small group of kids began to form around Daniel, drawn by Jasmine's energy and determination to make him feel included. Daniel couldn't believe what was happening. For so long, he had felt invisible or worse, like a target for everyone's scorn. But now, thanks to Jasmine, he was starting to see that there were people who wanted to stand by him, who saw him as more than just a boy in a wheelchair. By the end of the week, Daniel and Jasmine had become inseparable. They worked on homework together, played video games after school, and even started brainstorming ways to make their school a kinder place. Jasmine's confidence began to rub off on Daniel. He started sitting up straighter, speaking a little louder, and even smiling more often. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had an ally, someone who saw his worth and wasn't afraid to remind him of it. Jasmine didn't just help Daniel find his voice, she amplified it. And though the bullies still lurked in the background, their laughter no longer seemed as loud, their words no longer as sharp. Jasmine's friendship was the shield Daniel hadn't known he needed, and with her by his side, he began to see the possibility of standing up for himself and creating a better future. The next day at school, Daniel wheeled into the cafeteria with a sense of nervous anticipation. He knew the bullies would be there, it was their favorite place to stir trouble, but he wasn't alone anymore. Jasmine walked beside him, carrying her lunch tray with a confident stride. Her presence felt like a shield, her energy deflecting some of the tension that usually followed Daniel wherever he went. Sure enough, as Daniel and Jasmine settled at a table, the familiar group of boys approached. They moved in like a pack, their leader, a stocky boy named Tyler, wearing his signature smirk. Well, Tyler said loudly, making sure the room could hear. Looks like you found a babysitter, Daniel. What's the matter? Couldn't handle us on your own? The group laughed, their voices sharp and grating. Jasmine set her tray down deliberately and turned to face them. Babysitter, she repeated, raising an eyebrow. Funny, I thought I was sitting with a friend. But maybe you're projecting because you still need one. The laughter around Tyler faltered, some of the nearby kids chuckling at Jasmine's quick retort. Tyler's face reddened slightly, but he refused to back down. You think you're so smart, don't you? He shot back. Jasmine stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. No, I don't think, I know. And so does everyone else here. You're the only ones who seem to think being cruel makes you better than anyone. The other kids in the cafeteria began to notice the standoff. Whispers rippled through the room, and more students turned their attention to Daniel's table. For the first time, the bullies seemed uneasy under the weight of so many eyes. Why do you even care? Tyler muttered, his confidence waning. He's just different. Different doesn't mean less, Jasmine snapped, her voice rising slightly. Daniel's smarter, kinder, and braver than you'll ever be. The only thing he's missing is a need to tear people down to feel good about himself, unlike you. The cafeteria erupted into murmurs, and a few kids clapped quietly. Tyler's friends shuffled uncomfortably, their bravado slipping. One of them, a lanky boy named Chris, avoided Jasmine's gaze entirely, staring at the floor. Daniel, emboldened by Jasmine's unwavering support, spoke up for the first time. You know what's funny? He said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. You spend all this time trying to make me feel small, but you're the ones who look ridiculous. Tyler glared at him. What's that supposed to mean? It means that no matter how many jokes you make, no matter how much you try to humiliate me, it doesn't change who I am, Daniel continued. And it doesn't change the fact that everyone here can see through you now. The room grew quieter, the weight of Daniel's words settling over the crowd. Jasmine smiled at him, her pride evident. "You're done," she said, looking Tyler directly in the eyes. "Everyone here knows what kind of person you are now. Good luck trying to bully your way out of that." The tension in the air was thick, and Tyler's face twisted with frustration. For a moment, it looked like he might lash out, but Chris spoke up, his voice shaking. "She's right," Chris said quietly. I don't think this is funny anymore." Tyler whipped around to face him. "What are you talking about?" Chris shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know, man. It's messed up. We're the ones who look bad here, not him." The cafeteria erupted into whispers again, and Tyler's confidence crumbled. He glared at Chris, then back at Daniel and Jasmine. Without another word, he stormed off, his friends hesitating before following him. As the bullies retreated, the cafeteria filled with applause. Jasmine grinned, patting Daniel on the shoulder. "See? Told you they were all bark and no bite." Daniel smiled, his chest swelling with a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time, he felt like he had truly stood up for himself, not just because of Jasmine's support, but because he had found his own voice. Around them, students began to approach, offering kind words and encouragement. One girl handed Daniel a folded note that read, "You're inspiring. Thank you for standing up to them." Jasmine glanced at the note and nudged Daniel playfully. "Looks like you've got a fan club now," she said with a wink. Daniel laughed, the sound light and free. For the first time, he felt the weight of isolation lifting, replaced by the warmth of acceptance. The cafeteria incident spread like wildfire. By the next morning, almost everyone at school had seen or heard about the confrontation. Videos recorded on phones were shared on social media, with captions like "standing up to bullies" and "kindness over cruelty." For once, Daniel was at the center of attention not for ridicule, but for admiration. The principal called a school-wide assembly to address the situation. Standing on stage, he spoke firmly about the importance of respect and kindness. "We are a community," he said, his voice echoing in the large auditorium. "And in a community, there is no place for bullying or prejudice." What happened in our cafeteria was a powerful reminder that standing up for what's right takes courage, and that courage can inspire change. In the crowd, Daniel sat next to Jasmine, his heart pounding as the principal praised their actions. He glanced around, noticing that even the bullies were in attendance, their heads low as they listened. Later that afternoon, the principal called Tyler and his friends into his office, along with their parents. The boys sat in uncomfortable silence as the principal replayed clips of the video. Their parents watched with growing disapproval, their expressions ranging from anger to disappointment. "This behavior is unacceptable," the principal said sternly, pausing the video on Tyler's sneer. "Not just because of the cruelty shown here, but because of the example you've set for the rest of the school." One of the parents, Chris's mother, turned to her son, her voice heavy with emotion. "Is this how I raised you? To mock someone because they're different?" Chris shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "No, Mom. I'm sorry," he whispered. The principal continued, his tone firm but fair. "You boys will be facing consequences for your actions, detentions, community service, and participation in our new anti-bullying program. You will also be required to write formal apologies to Daniel." Tyler's fists clenched, but even he knew there was no way out. His parents' stern gazes left no room for defiance. The first step toward change came that same afternoon when Chris approached Daniel in the hallway. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and his shoulders were hunched. "Hey, Daniel," he said, his voice low. Daniel stopped, surprised to see Chris standing alone. "What do you want?" he asked cautiously. Chris looked at the floor, his face flushed. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't right, and I shouldn't have gone along with it." Daniel studied him for a moment, unsure whether to believe him. But something about Chris's demeanor felt genuine. "Why now?" Daniel asked. Chris shrugged, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I finally realized how wrong it was. And because you didn't deserve any of it. Daniel nodded slowly. Apology accepted, he said. But if you're serious, show it. Don't just say you're sorry, be better. Chris nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. I will. I promise. Over the next few weeks, the school rolled out its anti-bullying initiative. Daniel and Jasmine were invited to help design the program, their input shaping workshops and campaigns that promoted understanding and empathy. To everyone's surprise, Chris became one of the program's most active participants. He volunteered to speak at events, sharing his perspective as someone who had been on the wrong side of the issue. His vulnerability and honesty struck a chord with many students, and slowly, perceptions of him began to shift. Even Tyler, though less enthusiastic, complied with the program's requirements. While he didn't transform overnight, the experience forced him to confront the impact of his actions in a way he never had before. For Daniel, the changes were profound. The boy who had once been isolated and targeted now found himself surrounded by allies. Teachers praised his resilience, classmates sought his advice, and even strangers stopped him in the halls to thank him for inspiring them. One afternoon, during a workshop on kindness, Daniel wheeled to the front of the room to share his story. I used to think being different made me weak, he said, his voice steady. But now I know that what makes us different is what makes us strong. And standing up to hate doesn't just change the person being hurt, it changes everyone. The room erupted into applause, and Jasmine beamed at him from the front row. Daniel smiled back, knowing that together, they had turned a moment of pain into a movement for change. Over time, the bullying stopped completely. The boys who had tormented Daniel learned, through shame and reflection, that their actions were unacceptable. Michael, true to his word, began standing up for Daniel whenever he saw someone trying to cause trouble. For Daniel, the experience was transformative. He started participating in class discussions more often, his confidence growing with each day. Jasmine became one of his closest friends, and together, they worked to create a more inclusive environment at their school. Their efforts paid off when the school implemented an anti-bullying program, led in part by Daniel and Jasmine. The program focused on understanding and respecting differences, ensuring that no student felt alone or targeted. What began as a painful episode of bullying became a powerful lesson for everyone involved. Daniel's strength and resilience inspired not only his classmates, but also the adults who witnessed his journey. As he wheeled through the playground one sunny afternoon, surrounded by friends and laughter, Daniel realized that the bullies hadn't broken him. Instead, they had shown him just how strong he truly was, and that strength would carry him far beyond the playground.